Okay, it's 6:30, so we are going to get started here. Hi, my name is Mary Pat O'Neill. You're here for College 101 through the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I created the Find Your Fit program back in, I think, 2016, and this is a pretty in-depth presentation. I did this presentation back in February, but it wasn't recorded because we did it live. But this one will be recorded. And it's the same presentation, although I always update my presentations every single time. So there's a little bit of new information in here tonight. So I do this alone. I'm at home. I'm not very good at multitasking. So I will answer questions at the end. You're welcome to put them in the chat. If by chance you have to leave and your question doesn't get answered, you can always find me at findyourfit at lwsf.org. That information will be there at the end. Just to give, and also this is being recorded. Everybody who signed up will receive the recording. It usually takes the foundation 4 or 5 days to get it out. There will be handouts, the materials, the resources that I reference. I do not share my slide deck though, but if you said, hey, Mary Pat, could you please send me this specific slide because I found the information so fascinating, I will of course send it to you. I'm happy to do that. I always want people to know, one, I do not work for the Lake Washington Schools District. I do not work for the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I'm a volunteer for the Schools Foundation. I'm an independent college counselor in Redmond. And all that basically means is that I work with families and help them on the college process. And you don't have to worry that I'm withholding any information because I want to try to get you into my office or anything like that. I am going to share with you everything that I know and answer all of your questions that I can at the end. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things today. Here's a kind of an overview. I got to move my head so I can read these. What do colleges want to know about students in the application? We're going to talk about the different types of colleges, how to create a college list. We're going to deal with highly selective colleges. I'm going to talk about the depressing topic of the cost of college. And when I talk about colleges, keep in mind, I am talking about US colleges. I am not an expert in international colleges. This is the US system that we'll be talking about today. Oh, and as all things, when I do presentations, I always have some sort of technical deal. Try this again. I was very pleased with myself there. Okay. All right. So a couple things to keep in mind as I talk. There are about 1,900 four-year public and private colleges in the United States, and they all do things differently. The University of Washington does something different than UCLA or Boston University. They all do things differently. So oftentimes my response is going to be, it depends on the college. It's not me trying to, not answer your question. It just truly will depend on the college. And keeping in mind also that everyone is different. What is the right path for one student, the right college, the right major, the right whatever, can be very different. We're all humans. We're all different. I have 2 lovely adult children. One's 27, one's 25. I share their stories all the time, the poor kids. And they have the same parents, but they are very, very different people. And you might see the same thing in your family. Also, I do use the words college and university interchangeably. And Canadian citizens, this drives them crazy because in Canada, the words mean very different things. In the US, the terms are for undergraduate, it means the same thing. The difference is a college, if a school is called a college, it does not have a graduate school, whereas a university has a graduate school. But I use the terms most college counselors do, so not to drive you crazy. I do want to bring up, I want to give some terms here at the beginning today. So when we talk about colleges, and I said colleges or universities, you might hear the term liberal arts college, and you might hear the term research university. And both are fantastic. They are very different. And sometimes I'll have parents say to me, my child is going to study engineering or computer science or become a doctor or whatever. They are not going to a liberal arts college. And just, I want to clarify this. It has nothing to do with the majors. A student can go to a research university and study philosophy and creative writing if they wanted to, but they can also go to a liberal arts college and study computer science and engineering and any STEM field or whatever. So it has nothing to do with the majors. A liberal arts college, first of all, focuses on undergraduate education for the most part. They will have grad schools typically, but they could be law schools or masters in education, maybe an MBA, but they believe in a well-rounded education. The size is much smaller at a liberal arts college. There's much more classroom discussion. The classes are typically taught by professors, whereas at a research university, the professors are usually doing the research and grad students are teaching the undergrad classes. They don't use as many teaching assistants, if at all, at a liberal arts college. Class size is much smaller, which can be great if students want to be able to do research at the undergrad level, or if they need letters of rec for graduate school, for medical school, to have that personal letter of rec because it's a smaller environment versus an 800-person classroom size. And I'm not trying to make research universities bad. They're not. They can be fabulous opportunities, but I just hear such a negative about liberal arts college. And I just happen to think that they're wonderful. There can be greater opportunity for students to get leadership opportunities at the smaller campus. Again, more attention with the faculty. And on the flip side, some students really like the bigger name recognition. They want the larger class size. They can be more anonymous. Some students really like to be anonymous, and at a larger campus with 30, 40,000 undergrad, you can be anonymous. So just, I always say, keep an open mind. Don't say, no, I'm not going to a liberal arts college, or no, I'm not going to a research university. Keep an open mind and see what you find out and whether or not it's a good fit for you. Yeah, geez Louise. My Zoom. All right, let's see if we'll get moving here. Okay, another term that you might hear in a college name is a polytechnic or a technical institute, like Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Georgia Institute of Technology, Rochester Institute of Technology. So if you hear those words, what it means is that the focus is on applied learning. It's hands-on learning. It's a little different, whereas at a university, it can be more theoretical, especially at the beginning level of classes. So a lot of students really like the idea of hands-on applied learning. So that's all that means if you hear those words in the name of a school. And I always want to remind everybody that applying to college is not rocket science. There's a lot of talk that makes it sound like it's super complicated, that you have to hire a college counselor. No, you don't. Most parents are their children's college counselors. And personally, even though this is my job that I do, I think it's a luxury item. And the reason that I do volunteer my services through the foundation is it bothers me. I'm a first generation myself. My parents didn't go to college. And it bothers me that the students who get every advantage are the kids who get every advantage. And so that's why I want to make sure that this information is out there to level the playing field so that nobody is at a disadvantage. But it is not rocket science at all. And again, I'm a resource in the community, and I'm always happy to answer any questions that families have. So now let's talk about colleges. So one of the things that's frustrating is that colleges, four-year colleges, you're going for a bachelor's degree of some sort. There's 5 possible things that a college can ask a high school student for in their application. And when I say possible, it's because some colleges only want 1, and others want 5, and others want every number in between. And it would be so much easier for everybody involved if they would just do it the same way, but they don't. So we're going to go through the 5 pieces, which are the transcript, test scores, activity list, letters of rec, and essays. Keeping in mind that there are schools that want 1, some want 5, some want 3, some want 4, some want 2. So let's go through them. All right. Anybody can tell me why my Zoom freezes. Okay, so the first thing, and this is the piece that is never optional, a high school transcript. This is the most important piece in almost all situations with applying to college. And it makes sense. This is a student's track record. This is what shows the potential of a student to a college. And I mentioned that there could be 5 things that a college asks for. They're not typically weighed equally in the process. In almost all cases, this is the piece that is going to be weighed heavily. This, and then sometimes essays are weighed. So a couple different things here. So students have a GPA, a grade point average. It's a cumulative GPA for high school. And students, you should know what your GPA is. Sometimes kids have no clue. It's on your report card, it's on your unofficial transcript, which you can find on Skyward. But they have there's a GPA. And one of the things sometimes that gets tossed about and makes people freak out, and I'm hoping that you don't freak out, is there's 2 terms. There's an unweighted GPA and a weighted GPA. In Washington State, our public schools do not use a weighted GPA. We only use an unweighted. And what that means is we use a 4-point scale. An A is a 4, a B is a 3. You know, you guys know how it goes. And that's what we do. What a weighted GPA is, but remember, we don't do it, and it doesn't matter, is a weighted GPA would be if a student takes an advanced placement class, and if they get an A in the class, instead of it being a 4, they add a point. So it's a 5.0. If you were in a district where they had the International Baccalaureate program, IB, it would be, again, it would add a point. If you got a B in the class, and it would be a 4.0 instead of a, if a student takes an honors class, it's typically a 0.5 added to it, but we do not do that. And you don't have to worry about it, because when a student fills out their college application, which are typically filled out and completed, submitted in the fall of senior year, which means at the time of application, your GPA, your cumulative GPA, will be through the end of junior year. And so on the college application, it says, what is your cumulative GPA? And the student will fill it out. Then there are 2 boxes. One says, is this a weighted GPA or an unweighted GPA? And of course, in Washington State, we say unweighted. Not a big deal. So they understand that's an unweighted GPA. And here's the truth to the matter. Pretty much every college, when they get a student's transcript, they have their own methodology for taking it apart and refiguring the GPA. So if they want to wait, they'll weight it. If they don't want to, and again, they're consistent with everybody. It's not like they're changing it for anybody, but they will come up with a number that works for them. So you don't have to worry about it. But I always tell students to think of GPAs as buckets. And again, our top bucket starts at 4.0 to 3.75. Then we have 3.74 to 3.5, 3.49 to 3.25, and it just, buckets keep going down. So on this screen here, you see, this is the University of Seattle. This is their admitted class. This is from last fall. And you can see that 73% of admitted students have had a GPA, unweighted GPA of 3.75 or higher. 20% were in the 3.5 to 3.74. So that tells me that 93% of admitted students to the University of Washington, Seattle had a 3.5 or higher. So if I was talking to a student who, let's say, had a 3.3 GPA, which is a good GPA, it's a B+, and their dream was to go to the University of Washington, Seattle. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to say it's absolutely impossible, but it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen, because when I look at that chart, you can see that only 5% of admitted students fall in that. So that's why knowing your GPA is an important data point. The other thing to keep in mind with your transcript, there's what's called a secondary school report or a high school profile. It's just basically a report card on a school. And it's nothing that a student would ever submit to a college. Either the school counselors send it in on behalf of students, or the college already has it on file. But basically it says the student goes to this high school, it has X amount of students, this is the demographic breakdown of the students. This is the percentage of students who after graduation go on to a 4-year college, a 2-year college, or enter the military. The average ACT and SAT scores of the students, and then they show all the classes of quote unquote rigor, all right? And this is going to depend on the high school, because with high schools are different too. So my kids went to Eastlake, so I know Eastlake's curriculum pretty well. So at Eastlake, the rigor classes they start with honors classes, followed by the UW, University of Washington, in the classroom classes that they offered. And then at the very top are the AP classes. They're considered the most rigorous. And every high school is different. Skyline has only IB and honors. Interlake and Bellevue has everything. So it depends on the high school. And I always tell families this: all a college looks at is the curriculum offered to the student. Sometimes I'll hear from parents who say, my child has the chance to go to, let's say, one of the choice schools, but it's not a good fit, so they don't want to go. And they worry. And I'm like, they don't know that you could have gone to a different school. All they look at is, where did the student go? What's the curriculum offered? How did the student do based on that curriculum offered? And the reason why they want to know about the rigor classes, again, high schools are different. So Lake Washington is a very strong public school district. It's one of the biggest ones in the state. We have awesome rigorous classes, lots of great curriculum. But there are students in the state of Washington who go to high schools that don't offer regular calculus, let alone AP calculus. And colleges don't want to penalize students who don't take harder classes, because if they're not offered, how's the student supposed to do that? On the flip side, I've worked with students who go to strong high schools and they've never taken any rigor classes, like an advanced placement or whatever, and their grades are great, but they haven't pushed themselves. And again, it depends on the school, but there are colleges, and if any of you are interested in the University of Washington, I'll tell you, the University of Washington salivates over rigor. They love rigor and they want students to do well. So just understand that. So that doesn't mean that your child should be taking 6 AAP classes every year. I don't think that they should. I think that's too much. But I always tell students to take classes that interest them. One thing I do want to caution families about, especially as summer's approaching, I hear a lot of talk either from my own students, or I'm often on the Facebook page for the parents in the area. There's lots of talk about pushing ahead in the summer to get super advanced in math. I do not encourage students to do this, especially if it means that they're going to be completing the math curriculum at their high school before their senior year, where there's nothing left for them to take. It's not a good scenario. As I said, colleges look at how a student does what the student took based on the curriculum. One of the things that I know I noticed, and perhaps you did too, with remote learning through the pandemic, the class overall that did not translate well to remote was math. The number of students that I've talked to, my own students through Find Your Fit, their math skills suffered because it just didn't work well. And then when students try to, take a full year of class online through Apex or BYU, and then they jump ahead. I have seen so many students really struggle. I was talking to a student who, for whatever reason, she thought she should take pre-calculus over the summer, and she's taking AP Calc as a junior AB, and she's failing it. Like what's the point of that? And the other thing is, if a student has maximized their math class, and stats, stats is stats, but it's not like if you're going into engineering or computer science, it's not a math class. That means you're going to stop taking math about 1.5 years before you go to college. And again, colleges don't like that. They just want students to take, if they're in the STEM field and the class is appropriate for them, to be taking AP Calc BC as a senior. And then when they go off to college, they will continue. They won't have this big gap of math where they're going to forget things. So again, I'm not going to make a universal blanket, but for the most part, they shouldn't do it. There's so much better things I would rather have a student do in the summertime than to try to cram math into it. So try to, if you hear that chatter, because I know there's a lot of chatter and everybody feels like, oh, well, if so-and-so is doing it, I have to do it. No, you don't. Please stop it. The counselors don't like it. The math teachers don't like it. The colleges don't like it. It's really unnecessary. Just work with the curriculum offered at your school. Okay, what are other classes of rigor besides advanced placement? I often get asked questions about Running Start. Do colleges like Running Start? If you don't know what Running Start is, it is a dual enrollment class or program that allows juniors and seniors to take classes at the community college to fulfill their high school graduation credits and at the same time earn college credits. So a student can get up to 2 years of college credit paid for free. It is going to be part of their college record, so you want to make sure that they do well. Students still apply as freshmen to a college after, just like they normally would, and then their credits transfer over to the college and stuff like that. But so most colleges, especially in our area, they respect Running Start. There's no problem with Running Start. What can be nice for students is that if they do full-time Running Start, they take 3 classes a quarter. They're not on semesters, they're on quarters. A quarter lasts 10 weeks. 1 quarter of a community college class is the equivalent of 1 full year of a high school class. So the pace is much faster, but it gives students a lot more classes that they can take, especially if they're interested in something. Kids who don't enjoy the high school environment might love Running Start. So anyways, just know that the colleges do respect it. And then there's also what's known as college in the high school. Again, not all the high schools in the district offer it, but a number of them do. So like at East Lake, they have a couple of UW in the classroom, like UW pre-calculus. And what it means is, again, UW's on a quarter system. So they take a 1 quarter class in pre-calculus, but it's done over a school calendar year. So again, the pace is a little bit slower than it would be in high school, but it's more rigorous than a regular pre-calculus class. So those are the different classes of rigor that can be offered. But as I said, it's all about balance, because I said there's 5 possible things that a college can look for in the application. And if it's only academics, if a student's taking 4 AP classes in a year, 5 AP classes, 6 AP classes, oh my gosh, I get stressed out just thinking about it. It makes them very unbalanced and they don't have time. It's very unhealthy mentally for most students to be doing that. And so I just always ask students, what classes interest you? And if a student says, oh my gosh, I love history, well, then take AP World or AP Gov or AP US History, or if they like the sciences. But if a student goes, oh my gosh, I can't stand the sciences, well, then do what you have to do, for graduation requirements, but you don't need to take the APs. Find the APs that you like and enjoy, because human nature says if you enjoy the class, you're willing to do the harder work. There also can be special circumstances. A lot of students, might have experienced things, whether it be health issues, mental health issues. Sometimes students have had to retake a class, maybe during the pandemic, they didn't do very well and they retook a class. Just know that on college applications, there's a section for special circumstances where students can explain things. Again, this is not meant to be long and detailed and an excuse or anything, but allows students to explain circumstances that perhaps a college wouldn't understand, on an application. I was at a college conference last week, and there was a panel, and the University of Washington was on the panel. And the admissions person made a comment about how they don't like to see a free period on seniors' schedules. And I was kind of surprised by that. And she said, well, it's fine if, a student was doing it to be able to volunteer someplace, or if they had a job that they needed to go to. So again, if a student is taking a free period senior year and there's a reason for it, if it's just to have an easier schedule, again, UW won't like that. But if there's a reason and a student wants to explain that reason to a college, that would be a great place to put in why they were doing that, so that the school doesn't go, oh, they just wanted a lighter schedule. Well, there could be a very good reason why the student needs to have a free period. All right, so that was the transcript, which I went very in depth in because it's a big topic. Now we're going to talk about standardized testing. This is the second thing, and this is the area that has changed dramatically because of the pandemic. Prior to February, March of 2020, everybody had to take standardized tests. It was just a given for the most part, but it has changed, and it still is a little bit unpredictable. But most colleges are either test optional or test blind. So in our area, our University of Washington, Washington State, Western, Eastern, Central, Evergreen State College, the University of California system, the Cal State system, they don't look at test scores. They do not look at ACT scores, SAT scores. So, and pretty much in the West, I tell my students, really, you don't need them. Now, there are places that do require them. I just heard that Purdue is going to start asking for them again, starting with the class of 24. MIT wants them. Georgetown wants them. The Georgia public universities like Georgia Tech, the Florida public universities, they require them. They've changed their state laws that it's required. But for the most part, they're not. So again, if a student's blessed and they're super great test takers, take it. But there's a lot of kids who don't. I was talking to a senior or a junior today, and she said, yeah, I think I'm going to take it over the summer. And I'm like, why? I said, look at your list. Nobody's going, use that time on something else. You don't, if you needed it, I would tell you that, but you don't. So there's both an ACT and an SAT. We'll talk about the differences of them in a minute. Colleges accept both. Sometimes there's a misconception that colleges prefer one over the other. Not true. You just, whichever one you do better on. These are meant to measure, the ACT and SAT are meant to measure what a typical high school junior knows, which means freshmen shouldn't be doing anything, sophomores shouldn't be doing anything. They're not meant for them. They're meant for juniors. Sometimes test scores could be used for scholarship, merit scholarship. And the SAT got rid of the writing section a number of years ago, but the ACT still offers it. Just know if you are signing up to do the ACT, don't sign up for the writing section. No one's going to look at your score, and it's going to extend how long you have to sit there and take the test. And they're long enough. So just know you don't have to take the writing test. So the tests are different, okay? So the SAT is on a 400 to 1600 scale. It's a more conceptual test. It's actually a more difficult test. My joke is it's something like, a dog and a panda were walking down the street, an airplane flew overhead and dropped some balloons, and then the wind was blowing. It's just very complicated. Whereas when we get to the ACT, it's more like, here's a triangle. Can you figure out the area for it? It's a lot more straightforward. But the SAT is best for students who are slower readers, who are stronger in math because it's half math. If students have test anxiety, they might like the SAT better because it gives them more time to answer the questions. The ACT, so the SAT is reading, writing, language, and math. The ACT is English, reading, math, and then science. And some people freak out about the science section, but it's not scientific like formulas and theorems and things like that. It's scientific reading. So they give you a chart, they ask you questions. I'm not a very strong science person, but I remember when I took the SAT, because I'm a strong reader, I could answer the questions, and I did well on it. So I always tell students, don't freak out about that science section. And it's best for students who are strong and faster readers. I don't like this weaker in math because it doesn't mean that you're weaker in math. It's just there's less math, that you do well under pressure. And, you know, the kids who are always like first to finish, ACT is typically a good test for them. The PSAT, which is given to sophomore, the P in front of the SAT stands for preliminary SAT. It's given to sophomores in the district. The scores go nowhere. It is simply to introduce students to standardized testing. If you happen to be a sophomore or you have a sophomore student and your child took the PSAT, you might want to take a practice ACT right about now, and you can compare your scores. There's charts called concordance charts. And if your student did better on one over the other, then you know to focus on that one if they need to take tests. If their scores are similar, which does happen a lot, then I would ask the student, did you like the format of one better? Did it feel better for you? And then just focus on one. Most students don't need to be taking both. Like again, I do like a practice test just to see. You don't need to study or prepare for it. If you're a junior, again, same thing. If you took the PSAT in the fall and you're like thinking, oh, do I need to take a test? Maybe take a mock ACT. A lot of the test prep companies offer it. But just know sometimes students do better on one than the other. And there's different ways to prepare for these tests. Again, if you need to, you might not need to prepare at all. Familiarity is key. The more familiar a student is with the material, the better they tend to do. Tutors say that it takes about 8 to 12 weeks to prepare, and it's not 10, 15 hours a week. It's like 1 to 2 hours a week of preparing, because remember, these tests are meant to measure what a typical junior in high school knows. So this is meant to be the material. Now, if a student has not completed Algebra 2 before junior year, the math can be a little bit more challenging because it assumes the student has completed that. So if you're a junior and you're taking Algebra 2 this year, again, you want to wait till you finish the class. You can self-study, you can get books, and maybe have a parent help you to take the test, grade your test. Khan Academy offers free online SAT tutoring and PSAT tutoring. You can take classes. You can do one-on-one tutoring. Personally, I would do tutoring over a class because in a tutoring situation, the student's needs are addressed versus in a class, they have to go to the lowest common denominator. If you're a student in high school and you receive accommodations in school, maybe you get extra time or you get to take your test in a quiet area. If you have a 504 IEP with accommodations, you are also allowed to get accommodations for your standardized testing, including AP tests. You have to arrange those through your school counselor, though. You can't just do it yourself, but and you can also just do nothing, which some kids do. So there's just different ways to prepare. And then these are the dates. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on these. So you can see that they're offered on a Saturday, not the same Saturday. You got the SAT, you got the ACT. And a lot of schools have started doing school day testing too. But these are the more traditional dates that they've always done. If you notice for both of these, there are 3 dates that are highlighted in yellow. And what that means is for the SAT, there's a service called question and answer service. For the ACT, it's called test information release. It's a special service. You pay a little bit extra, I don't know, maybe 20 bucks extra for the service when you sign up to take the test. And what happens is that after your test has been graded and scored, they send you back your test booklet and your answer key. So then a student knows exactly what they got right and what they got wrong on the test. And as I tell my students, if it were me, I would take it for the first time on one of these highlighted months. And I probably wouldn't study too much. I would, again, I would just take it because it's meant to measure what a typical junior in high school knows. And then if I like my score, awesome, I'm done. But if I'm like, I didn't do quite as well as I thought, or I do need test scores for certain colleges, that's when I might go work with a tutor and be able to show them that material and say, this is where I need to work. So that's that information. Also, the SAT is changing, and this is for the class of 25, which are sophomores this year. It's kind of an exciting change. So it's going digital. It's going to be on computers. And they're doing it because there's just so much cheating that goes on. So everybody will have a different test. It's adaptive, which means the first section, so there's two sections. The first section, everybody's the same, but then depending on how a student does on that first section, it'll lead them in one of two directions. If they scored really well, then they're going to go to the harder section. And you might say, why do I want that? It's because you get more points for it, so your score will end up higher. It's a shorter test. It's going to be 2 hours and 14 minutes instead of 3 hours. The reading passages are much shorter. If you've taken an SAT already, there's like this huge page with like 10 paragraphs and very complicated questions. It's going to be one paragraph with just 1 or 2 questions to it. They're getting rid of the non-calculator math, and the turnaround time for scores is going to be much faster. So if you're the class of 25, your PSAT in October will be the new format. It's going to be digital, and then they're rolling out the actual SAT I think March of 2024. Again, class of 24 will be done with all their testing by then. That's why they can't do it, but just know changes are coming. So sometimes people think that applying to college is a transaction, in the sense that, oh, if I take 12 AP classes and get all A's and I have a test score and whatever, that guarantees them anything in college as far as admission. And it doesn't work that way in the US. And I realize that in many other countries, applying to college is much more transactional. You take an entrance exam, they might factor in your GPA, the 0.000 difference in some score is what determines what university a person is allowed to go to. It doesn't work like that in the United States. It's very different. And that's why one of the reasons why I like my job so much is because it's fun to see the transformative nature of high school students over this process. But please know, it's not a transaction. And I will talk to students and I get that sense that they think it's, okay, I've checked this box, I've checked this box, I've checked this box. And for many kids, they think life is very linear, that if I do this, 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 and it guarantees this. It doesn't work that way. And for a lot of students, the college process can be the first time that they experience rejection. So a couple thoughts on highly selective schools. And the term highly selective simply means too many qualified students are applying for too few of spots. That's what highly selective means. So colleges are businesses. Never forget that. They are businesses. And they work very hard to get their acceptance rates as low as they possibly can. I'll have a chart up in a little bit where you can see how acceptance rates have changed. But I don't know, about maybe 18, 19 years ago, the University of Chicago had a 44% acceptance rate. It's down to what, 6 or 7%. Northeastern University used to be kind of known as the school everybody could get in there. 30 years ago, it had about a 95% acceptance rate. It's down to about 15. So just know they do work really hard to get their acceptance rates low. I'm not going to spend any time on rankings, but rankings, just do a little Google search of why college rankings are a bunch of bunk, because they are. Don't pay attention to that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about yield in a little bit, but colleges they want high yield, low acceptance rate. For some schools, not all of them, there are hooks that give a student an advantage in the admissions process. And that one of them is the recruited athlete. If somebody is being recruited for a sport, especially if it's a money-making sport like football, basketball, those NCAA tournaments, boy, colleges make a lot of money on those. Those students can, it's a golden ticket. So if any of you are being recruited, yay, and I've seen some of that lately. Sometimes if the parents attended the university, that can give a student a little bump up in the admissions process. That's called a legacy. Again, not all schools do it, but some do. And then there's also what's called an endowment, which again, I'm here in Redmond. My kids went to public school. Most of the families I work with are public school families. And what an endowment is, and it's very legal, is where a family can write a check for $10 million, $15 million, and suddenly, wow, that student is very attractive to that school. And the reality is most, most of us, I don't know about you, but I can't compete with that. That is not something that we can do in our family. So it can be hard. And, and especially with the Ivy Leagues, and students don't understand that, there's boarding schools that feed into these schools. And I mean, it's just a very different world. Doesn't mean that students out here don't get accepted. They do, but it's not as straightforward. It's not as fair. It's not as transparent. That's just the reality. Also, we're going to talk more about merit aid, which is scholarship money. Because college is super, super, super expensive. Some of these schools are getting close to $90,000 a year, and they don't give merit aid, which is a tuition discount based on the students' grades and things like that. They don't have to. So there's no scholarship money there. And then the other thing is where we live. The Seattle area, I'm just always amazed at how bright the students are in our area. We have so many technology companies, smart parents who have smart kids, and the colleges just can't take all the smart kids from the Seattle area. And I always tell kids, I mean, the reality is there's 27,000 public high schools in America. There's 10,000 private high schools. And kind of like you might be all that in your school, but you don't know who else is applying and all that they've done. So it can just be hard. And this is just a slide that I show. I'm not trying to be, depressing, but there's just too many qualified students, as I said. You look at, because I think it's hard to conceptualize what's a 3% acceptance rate, what's a 5% acceptance rate, and these numbers are from last year. I'll be updating them once the numbers are out from this year's admissions, but you can see at Brown, 46,000 students applied and 44,000 were rejected. MIT, 33,000 applied, 31,000 rejected. UPenn, 40,000 applied, 36,000 rejected. And the admissions people will say all the time, 85% of the students who applied more than qualified, would be so successful. They just don't have enough spots. And that's what I meant when I talked about the transaction part. I guarantee you that the vast majority, if not all of the students who are applying, have 4.0s, have taken lots of classes of rigor, probably have stellar test scores. It's not enough, because it's not that uncommon. And it's not to minimize what students do, but you need to keep that into perspective. Sometimes I hear people say, it's a lottery. Well, that annoys me, because it is not a lottery at all. When I see students who get into the highly selective schools, I can usually pinpoint exactly why they got in. It's not a lottery. I kind of wish it was, and that might be slightly fairer. And this is the chart that I was talking about earlier that just shows the change. So at the far left, you've got the 2022 acceptance rate and the number of applications, and then 10 years earlier, 2012, and then 30 years earlier, 1992. So, you look at that and you say, wow, look at UPenn. They had almost a 40% acceptance rate 30 years ago. And now it's 5.9, and their applications went from 12,000 to 56,000. I once had a poor kid whose dad did not sound like anybody I'd want to hang out with, quite frankly, but he told his son that he'd be kind of a loser if he didn't get into UCLA, because that's where he went. And I said, when'd your dad go? Like 25 years ago? And was he an in-state student? And it's just like, why would you say things like, I've had parents who've told their kids, I didn't get into Yale, so now it's your responsibility to get into Yale to save the family honor. And I'm like, you're not comparing apples to apples. It's a very, very different world. And if you didn't get into Yale 30 years ago, it's highly unlikely, just given the data. And it just puts a lot of stress on students. So again, sometimes I meet with students who have a little bit of a, look at me, I'm so great, I'm going to get into, they'll name off all these schools. And I don't mean this to smack them down or anything, but the question I always ask, help me understand, what is it about you that will help you earn one of those spots? Because if 46,000 students applying to Brown, 44,000 are rejected, what is it about you? And again, it can't be just that you have grades and test scores, because that's a given. Everybody does. So that leads us to the next thing. And this is the area where, when I said I can usually pinpoint, say, I know what a student what they were able to bring on their application. It's usually an activity that they've done. So another part of the application process for many schools is the high school activity list. And basically, colleges just want to know, when a student isn't in school and isn't doing homework, how do they spend their time? And it's a working document. It starts in 9th grade. So if any of you are 9th grade or above and you haven't done this, just start it now. Just a Google Doc, a Word doc, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to look fancy or anything like that. But they just want to know, how do you spend your time? They want to know the hours per week, the weeks per year, and then ultimately on a college application, they say, put these in order of importance to you. And again, it depends on the college application that a student is completing, but in most cases, it's going to be 150 character description. That's the maximum allowed. And there's different categories for activities. You can do things at your high school, so organized activities, but I work with a lot of kids who they don't enjoy that type of thing. You can do things within the community. You can do sports. Sometimes I'm asked, my student doesn't do sports, can they still go to college? Of course. Sometimes sports take up a whole lot of time, and again, that's great. And if you have the potential to be recruited, go for it. But if it's not something, if one, you're not good enough to be recruited, or you're not just really enjoying it that much, it's okay to maybe cut back a little bit so that you have more time for other things. You can do things through a religious organization. Colleges do differentiate between extracurricular activities and volunteer activities. And again, it doesn't mean you have to do a 40-hour a week volunteer thing, but if you're interested in helping the environment, maybe once a month you go to a park cleanup for an hour or something like that. Or if you love sports, maybe you love soccer, maybe you volunteer to help coach a soccer team. It can be things like that. Students can have jobs, they can have hobbies and special interests, and they can also highlight any awards that they've received. And sometimes students think that all these activities have to be like organized activities, but sometimes students do things on their own. I've had kids who build Tesla coils in their backyard, or students who write screenplays, or who have a blog, all that kind of, or make little movies, whatever. Babysit, take care of, have to make dinner every night for their family, maybe have to take care of siblings or a grandparent who lives with them. All those type of things count. They just want to know, how do you spend your time? And this is why I think activities are so important, because again, we're in this strong geographic area where there's so many strong high school students with good grades, good test scores, classes of rigor. So everybody looks the same. How can you differentiate yourself? I think activities can help to do that. We're going to talk more about college majors in a little bit. And again, it depends on the college and how they approach it. But there are some college majors that directly admit freshmen into the program, and it can be quite selective. Anybody thinking about UW computer science or engineering, or maybe you want to go into nursing school. And it's selective. It's not necessarily easy to get into. And so a student's activities above and beyond what they have done in taking high school classes can help prove that a student knows that that's what they want to do. More importantly, activities can help a student learn that they're on the right track. So like if I have a student who's like, I'm all gung-ho about engineering, but they've never done anything engineering oriented. Sure, they've taken math, whatever, or physics, but they've never done anything engineering oriented. I'm like, please explore it. Because that happened with my son. He went into engineering and he knew within 2 weeks that it was not the right major for him. And, I wish I had encouraged him to do something that was engineering oriented, because it didn't make it was bad. It just wasn't the right fit for him. So activities, and again, do all your activities have to be career oriented? No. But if there's something that you're interested in, I would encourage you to do something, whether it be job shadowing or what have you. I've said this for years prior even to COVID. I would so rather a student spend more time on activities than trying to improve a test score. And that's what I said to the student today, who was like, yeah, I think I'm going to take it in the summer, but she doesn't need them. And I'd rather she spend some time doing some activities that are interesting. And colleges prefer depth to width. Sometimes I meet students who are in 20 activities. Again, they're checking that box. They think it's a transaction. Colleges would much rather that a student go deep. And when I mentioned students who get into the more highly selective schools, in most cases, it's because, yes, they have great grades, rigor, test scores, all that wonderful stuff. But they have typically found some activity that speaks to them, that they're really passionate about, and it is uniquely theirs. And it's a story that only they can tell. And that tends to be kind of standard. And again, I can't tell you what that is because it depends on the person, but ninth and 10th grade, sure, do lots of group stuff, figure things out. But if there's something that you're passionate about, something that breaks your heart, some problem that you want to solve, do what you can and see what happens. The fourth possible thing that a college can ask for would be letters of recommendation. And I have to tell you, all the pieces of the college application, this is the one that drives students, and then probably their parents too, the craziest, because you can't control it. You have to manage somebody. So it's not always easy. But there's different types of letters of recommendation that a college can ask for. Again, it depends on the college. There's counselor letters, and a lot of times students worry about those because they're like, I don't know my counselor changes every year. It's really more of a form that the counselor is filling out that the college sends, so don't worry about it. Then there can be teacher recommendations, and again, it depends on the schools you're applying to. None of UW doesn't ask, they won't take them. Washington State won't take them. The Cal State schools won't take them, UC schools won't take them, so you might not need them. But then there are others that do. The teacher recommendations, the teacher must have taught the student in high school. That's a requirement. Colleges tend to like junior and senior year letters better because they're more recent, the work is harder, you're more mature. That doesn't mean you can't ask like a sophomore teacher, but again, just generally speaking, colleges like that, they tend to be from core teachers. If you're a junior right now, and you think you might need them, I usually say 2 is a good number to have. You might need more. Again, it depends on your college list. But if you think you need letters of rec, I would ask your teachers now. Again, they won't be writing them now, but get them lined up. Just simply asking the teacher, would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? I'm going to be applying to college in the fall. Again, there's more work that you can do to make it easier for them. They might have a form for you to fill out. They might want to interview you, whatever. But you don't want to wait until October of senior year, because the odds are slim that you will get the teacher that you want. Teachers do not have to write letters of recommendation. They are above and beyond their job description. They are a ton of work. Any parent who's ever written a letter of rec will probably be nodding their heads. They're hard to write. So be super kind, give them plenty of time, but just get them lined up now and then ask them, how would you want me to handle it? And they might say, oh, come see me in September. Okay, well, put a note on your phone, go talk to them in September. They might say, fill out the form now, I'll write it over some, summer break, whatever. But if you are a junior, I would start nailing those down. Many colleges that require teacher recommendations will allow what's called an outside recommendation, which is basically a non-teacher. It could be a coach, it could be your boss, it could be your neighbor that you babysit for, it could be your grandmother. Again, but just know that those are there too. So, and if you're a younger student, if you're not a junior and you never talk to your teachers, get in the habit of saying, hi, great class, like your sweater, here's some cookies, because it's a lot easier to ask somebody to write something for you if you have engaged with them a little bit. So, all right, and then the final piece of the college application is the college essay or essays. Again, they're not always required. There are schools, Washington State, Montana State, Arizona State, University of Arizona, Boise State, and I'm sure a lot more. There's no essays, nothing's required. But then there's a lot of schools that do require essays. It's a very different style of writing than what students are taught in high school. It's more of a conversational storytelling. There's a word count, so you have to be very strategic with your words. And the student's goal is to tell a story that the student is the only person in the world who can tell it, which sounds intimidating. it's not as hard as it sounds, but this is the chance for a student to show their character and personality, because quite frankly, the rest of the application is pretty cut and dried with data, and this allows a student to show who they are. And this is where a student's activities are so powerful, because it gives the student anecdotal proof, like, oh, you want to see my leadership skills? Let me tell you what happened when I took charge of this. Or, oh, you want to understand how I problem solve? Well, you know what? I was doing this volunteer thing and it blew up and I had to figure out how to do it, blah, blah. Find Your Fit, we do essay workshops. We also do a boot camp in the summer, which will include a boot camp or an essay workshop. And then I do additional essay workshops. So those will be available. And it'll be interesting to see the impact, this whole ChatGPT. I've tried it, I've looked at it. Quite frankly, I think it might improve the writing style, but it doesn't show a student's character and personality. I don't think it's the same thing. It might be a tool to use, but I like to think I can still add value, but who knows? I really don't. It'll be interesting to see what happens with all that. So here's the timeline. And again, there's going to be handouts that I send out, but the transcript in most cases, a college is going to look at 9th through 11th grade. Sometimes students ask, hey, what about senior year? Does that even count? Yes, it does count. They will ask you on your college application, what classes are you taking senior year? A lot of times colleges ask for mid-year reports in senior year, so your counselor will send those off. They look at your grades. If let's say you got admitted to UW and then you're like, yes, I'm so excited. And then your grades start to slip. And so by the end of senior year, all those A's and B's turned into C's and D's. There's a very good chance that the college, especially like a UW or somebody like that, will say, sorry, we don't want you anymore. So your grades do matter. Pay attention to that. ACT and SAT scores, again, it's 11th or 12th grade. Sometimes colleges say self-report them. Other colleges want official. Again, it's going to depend on the college. Your activity list starts in 9th grade. As I said, it's a working document. And what I mean by that is start it, put a note on your calendar at the end of first semester, spend a couple minutes updating it. Second, put an update on your calendar at the end of second semester, and a reminder at the end of the summer. If you just spend a couple minutes, a couple times a year, by the time you're a senior, you're golden. You don't have to be going to your mom and dad, oh my God, I don't remember. What did I do in 9th grade? And keep in mind that 9th grade starts the day 8th grade was over. So the summer before 9th grade counts too. Letters of rec, as I said, ask in junior year. These are uploaded. You don't see your letters of rec, and there's a thing you have to sign saying that you know that you won't be seeing your letters of rec, but they're just uploaded. Teachers only write one. They don't have to write one to each college that you're applying to. And then the essays are for rising seniors in senior year. And that's just that. Okay, so there's a couple more admission concepts. This is some of the information that I added from February. So there's a term that you might hear sometimes, holistic review, that a college does a holistic review. What does that mean? And what it means is how, and again, remember, it depends on the college. So holistic review isn't the same information for everybody, but it's how well does a candidate align with the school's goals for the incoming class. And I tell this to students all the time. Before they're starting to take the application, before the application season opens, the colleges, the board of directors, and they're a business, they've got all these goals. They put together, what are they looking for? And they don't publicize that stuff. So that's why sometimes one student gets in with lower grades, but there might be something that student has that they're looking for. And holistic review means it's factors beyond academics. It's not, it's that, if it was just the academics, then all those 4.0 students who apply to UW or UCLA would get in, and the 3.8 student wouldn't. But that's not how it works, because it's a holistic review. There's another term that's important. It's called institutional priorities. And these are very functional, they're very specific, and they're very quantifiable. And what I mean by that is, so we're going to be going into a lot of data here, but one school that sometimes comes up in conversation with families, and they're like, oh, we're going to apply to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and we feel very comfortable that we're going to be admitted. They're like, this is my safety school. And I always laugh at them and I'm like, what are you talking about? I've worked with tons of kids. Again, I don't have tons of kids applying there, but that's one of those schools that I don't see students getting into very often. And the reason why is it's their institutional priorities. First of all, it's a very hard school to get into. Their acceptance rate is very low. But also by the law of the school, it's written in their bylaws, they have to 82% of their admitted students have to be North Carolina residents. So that's why it's so hard for out-of-state students to get into UNC Chapel Hill, especially when we're up here in Seattle so far away and things like that. So just, you do want to pay attention, and you can always ask a college, what kind of students are you looking for? And it could be, like this year, I noticed that my female students did better getting admitted to computer science programs, but quite frankly, male students are like colleges are trying to get more males, but not in computer science because it's a male dominated field and they're trying to give the females, so there's lots of different stuff. So just know there's things that are out of your control. And it doesn't mean that you're not good or you're not qualified. You are. It's just there's lots of things that are outside of your control. I mentioned yield, and yield means the percentage of students who choose to enroll after being offered admission. So if I was to pull up, I was looking at this with a student today. So a couple years ago, UW got 46,000 applications, 26,000 students were admitted, but ultimately only 7,000 students take their spot. And that's because colleges know that students apply to more than one school. No, pretty uncommon for a student just to apply to one school. And so if a student applies to 10 schools, they get into 8, they can only go to one school, and that one school gets to add them to their yield. So colleges want high yields. They want low acceptance rate, high yields. And then there's this term called yield management. And it's the practice of rejecting a qualified applicant under the assumption that they'll be accepted in a role at a more selective university. That's the proper, definition, but it doesn't have to be at a more selective university. But it could be, we're going to talk a little bit about demonstrated interest in a little bit, but let's say a student applied to a school in Vermont, Vermont, and they, again, they track everything, and they go, we never get kids from Seattle. No, kids from Seattle, we have such a small percentage, but they'll look and they'll say, okay, did this student do anything to demonstrate that they're actually interested in it? Have they visited us? Have they reached out to admissions? Do the parents open up the emails that we send them? And if they track that sort of stuff, and a lot of schools do, and they go, this kid's done nothing, we don't want to offer one of our spots to a kid that we feel very comfortable is not going to say yes to us. And so that's why, again, you'll hear a little chatter on social media. Oh my God, my 4.0 kid did not get accepted to the school with an 80% acceptance rate. And it's like, because they don't want to waste an admission. So again, I'm kind of throwing lots of data points at you, but I think it's important to understand that all these things come into play. And so there's a great resource. Again, this will be on the resource sheet that I send. The website's called collegedata.com, and it's free. And every college is on there, and there's all these different tabs for the college. And one of the tabs, it's the second tab, it's called admission. And if you click on that admission tab and scroll down, you will see these scattergrams that show, and I know this is very hard to read, but it shows how students are selected by that specific college. They show what's very important, considered, and not considered. And you can see that the school on the left looks at rigor, GPA, and essays is very important. They don't look at standardized tests, class rank recommendations, interviews, level of applicants' interest, geographic, you can see all that. Whereas the school on the right, the most important thing to them is academic GPA. Rigor is important, essays are important, all that stuff like that, but it's not as important as GPA. So you can kind of get a little bit of a sense. There are some schools where The first generation is super important to a school, and so they will prioritize those. So just know that you can have these conversations with colleges and ask them, what are your priorities? So how do you create a balanced college list? So there are three types of colleges in the United States, which I'm going to explain. And the type of college dramatically impacts both admissibility and cost for a student. I'm going to take a sip of water here. I recently heard that you can get dehydrated with really intense information. I realize I've been talking for an hour. I should probably drink something. You should probably have a glass of water too, because I'm going through pretty deep information. Anyways, so there's three different types of colleges in the United States. The first one is the in-state public. We're in Washington State, and we have 6 four-year public universities. University of Washington, Washington State, Western Washington, Eastern Washington, Central Washington, and Evergreen State College. Because you live in Washington State, you being the student, you have priority admission at our 6 schools. So at UW last year, 71% of admitted students were Washington State students. They prioritize Washington State. We pay property taxes. Property taxes fund education. Because of all the property taxes that we pay, they discount the tuition at our 6 schools. It's not cheap still, but compared to the other 2 numbers that 2 types of colleges that I'm going to talk about, it's quite the savings. So this past year, the University of Washington and Washington State, they're about the same for tuition. It's about $12,000. The other schools are less. But that's why so many families and students want to attend in-state schools, and it's because of the cost. It's hard to beat out of in-state tuition. The second category is very tricky. It's the out-of-state public university, and I have to talk about 49 states. So I'm going to speak very generally here. First of all, you're not a resident in these 49 states, so you don't have the priority admission. You're not a resident, so you haven't paid property taxes, so you've lost the tuition discount. Out-of-state or non-resident tuition is typically 3 times in-state tuition, whatever the in-state tuition is. And again, that depends on the state. Wyoming, South Dakota, a lot less expensive than California or Texas. So I always tell students that one of the things that they need to do when they're trying to figure out how admissible that they are is finding out the percentage of out-of-state students that a college admits, because it's all over the board. So here in the West, states like Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, Idaho, Utah, New Mexico, there's not a lot of people in those states. And it's fairly easy for students to be admitted to those schools. And again, if a student has strong grades, maybe test scores, it depends, they will not only be admitted, but they might shower them with money and say, oh, we really want you, we're going to attract you with scholarship money. But then there are other states. California is certainly one of them. Texas is one of them. Georgia, Florida. They're very crowded states, and parents get annoyed when their own kids can't get into their state schools that they've paid the property taxes for. So, that's why when kids go, oh, I want to go to the UCs, and it's like, it can just be hard because they don't accept that many, because again, they have limits as to how many total percentage of students that they can accept from outside the state. And then there's also the cost factor. So some out-of-state schools, universities, will give scholarship money to out-of-state non-residents, and others will not. They can say, other states save all their scholarship money for their residents. So again, it depends on the school. And the third category of school or university college is the private. And sometimes families will say, oh, they're too expensive. They're actually not any more expensive typically than the out-of-state public. Again, it depends, but so they don't care. They're not funded through property taxes, so residency isn't an issue. And again, depending on the school, they can be very, very generous with scholarship money. I had some of my seniors this past year who $30,000, $37,000 a year from private schools, from very good private schools. So there's money out there to make it more equitable to the in-state public. And these are just some of the examples of in-state, out-of-state data. But if you look at the second column there with University of California, UCLA, it's got a 9% acceptance rate, which is very low. So that makes it an extreme reach school. And the way I categorize acceptances, and then only 19% of the students accepted are from outside of the state of California. You can see there's Chapel Hill that I mentioned, UT Austin. Texas is so protective of their residents. Again, only 9% of admitted students are from outside of the state of Texas. So it just, again, doesn't mean you can't get in, doesn't mean you shouldn't apply if that's your dream school, but just keep it in perspective that it's not a, look at me with my 4.0 in test scores. It might not make a difference just because there's so many qualified students applying. So when you're creating a college list, it's important to know your data points as a student. And one of them is your high school cumulative GPA. And, it is important. Again, it's not trying to make anyone feel good or bad. And one of the things I always tell students in the Lake Washington School District is, remember, we do not have A minuses. It's a 4.0 system. So you get an A, which goes from 90 to 100, 4.0. The minute you get to 89.9, it's a 3.3 drop. It's a 3.3 GPA. So that's a 0.7 drop in GPA. So pay attention because those add up. I've met with students who go, oh, look at all those B pluses that you got. And it's just, again, I mean, it is what it is. But if you can do some work paying attention to your grades earlier in the semester, not waiting to the last week of school and wondering what you can do to improve it, but see what you can do. Again, have you, how many rigor classes have you taken? Do you need test scores? The impact of COVID is the gift that keeps on giving, and some students have stories to tell about how it negatively impacted them, and you can tell those stories. And I always say, no one's defined by a number, but your data, it is important. Okay, it is an important piece of the puzzle. There's a number of different college search sites. So you can go to your search engine and type in college search sites and you'll get tons of them. These are just a selection. I tend to use College Board a lot. I always say I'm an old lady though. That's probably why I use College Board, but I do like it. But there's, just find the one that works for you. There's a number of filters that they will use on a college search site. Here's a number of them. There's different sizes. A small college is 2,000 students or less. Medium is 2,000 to 15,000 typically, and large is over 15,000. And I always say, don't think you only want to go to a large or you only want to go, check them out. You might be surprised. Geographic location. Do you want an urban, suburban, rural setting? Commuter or residential? What that means is most of the students that I'm working with, I would say they want a residential. They're looking more for that traditional college experience where students live on dorms or in apartments, in or around the campus. Everybody's there on the weekends, nights, and all that kind of stuff. A commuter campus simply means that most students do not live on campus, that they're coming and going. And there's nothing wrong with them. I actually went to a commuter college myself, but it's a different feel. And if you are looking for that residential, you might be like, oh my God, everybody's gone. I'm kind of, there's really nobody left here, and it could be kind of lonely. Again, kind of majors. Do you have to know your major? No, we'll talk more about that. But if you think you might want to be a nurse, make sure they offer it, or make, computer science or biology or psychology, whatever. Support programs. If you're a student who needs some sort of support, whether it be for a learning difference, if you have an IEP or 504 or a physical disability, colleges don't have to offer anything. Most do, but you can put those in. You want to make sure that they have the support that you need. Pay attention to the weather. Like kids will tell me, oh, I want to go to school in Boston. And then I ask if they like winter. They're like, no. It's like, well, you can have winter for 4 or 5 months in that area. Travel, this is more of a mom thing for me. Pay attention to how far and how difficult it is to get to the airport, because parents, you won't be the one taking them. Your child's going to have to get themselves to and from. And, if it's a 2-hour Uber ride versus a 10-minute shuttle, it can make a big difference. But I highlighted the acceptance rate there. And the reason I do that is I get it. People know colleges, they know the names of colleges. But the colleges that most people know are the most selective. It's the less than 10% acceptance rate. And as I said, it's not that a student's not qualified, it's just there's not enough spots. So, if you're, broaden it out. There's fabulous colleges that have a 60% acceptance rate. And we'll talk about how can you tell if a school is a good school, because nobody wants to go to a bad school. But just broaden that acceptance rate. And as I said, here's just some more data. You know me, I love my data, but there's 1,932 four-year public and private colleges. 26 of them accept 10% or less of the students. Then there's 56 colleges that accept between 10 and 25%. And when I'm telling a student how admissible that they are, again, I'm not trying to criticize the student. I'm just wanting to keep putting things in perspective so that they aren't walking around going, oh, I'm getting into Stanford, type thing. Less than 10%, I tell them it's an extreme reach or highly unlikely. 10 to 25%, it's a reach. Again, unlikely. Again, it could happen and I'll be thrilled for them, but again, have a balanced list. So that's a total of 79 colleges or universities, which ignores 1,853 schools. Now, are all of them phenomenal? No, but a lot of them are. They really are. So do yourself a favor and know that there's more to picking the right school than just the acceptance rate. So what do you do with all this information? I always tell students or parents, start a spreadsheet. You might have the name, the location, the type, is it in-state, out-of-state, private, size, cost, application requirements. Again, they're going to be all over the board. Keep an open mind, and there is a great resource that I like a lot called the FISC Guide. You can find it on Amazon. It comes out every year. It's a big, thick directory. I think there's an online version too. It's the top 300 schools in the United States. As I said, there's about 1,900. So there's 1,600 not in there, and there's a lot of wonderful schools that aren't in there. Washington State, University of Portland, San Diego State, Cal Poly, they're not in there. It doesn't make them bad schools. They're just not in the FISC Guide. But there are 300 schools that are, and I love the FISC Guide because it's a great way for students to learn more about a university. They're not marketing pieces. They're not written by college administrators. They're based on student surveys. They talk about the academic environment of a campus, what are the professors like, what are the core freshman requirements, what are the strong majors, is it a Hunger Games environment in the classrooms, or is it more collaborative? What's the social scene like? Dorms, cafeterias, do you have to be in Greek life? Diversity, sports scene, what do kids do on the weekends? All that kind of stuff. And I always tell students, keep an open mind. If there's a school that comes up, you go, I've never heard of it. Oh, but look, it's in the FISC Guide. Read it. And be like, oh, man, this looks like a keeper. And then maybe you take the time to go visit it or do further research. But it's a less than $20 book that comes out every year. The career counseling offices in the high school, I would imagine, probably have a copy or two. The libraries probably have a copy too, but you can buy one and share one with a couple families. But it's a great resource. I really do like the FISC Guide. There's other good sources of data. I mentioned both of them already. College Data and College Board. They're ones that I use a lot. Again, there's tons of data that's out there, but you're going to see lots of good information. So this is from College Board. This is where you can see like the range of GPA. Diversity is really important to a lot of students, myself there. So it kind of shows you the breakdown. It shows you, let me see here. Oh, extracurricular, like I was meeting with a student who'd like to cheer in high school or in college. So I had to make sure that the schools on our list had women's cheer. I've had students who want to do dance. I've had students who want to work for a student newspaper, and you can search for all those type of things. We are doing so well here. Now I've frozen up again. All right. Okay, and then College Data, which I used earlier with the selection and what was important. But here you can see, again, ethnicity, GPA, test scores, high school requirements. They also have information about average classroom size. So they'll tell you 10% of our classrooms have 20 students or less, and all that kind of stuff. So there's tons and tons of information. I love technology, except when I hate it. All right. Okay. So again, I know people focus on the acceptance rate of a school, but I think that only focuses on the input, not the output. And I think the output is more important. Like I said, there's such wonderful schools that accept more than 10% or 20% of the students. And so what are some of the things that I look at a college, and I hope that you will also consider looking at? Again, I'm a big data person. So I look at the 4-year graduation rate. The government requires colleges to report their 6-year graduation rate, but I'm going to be talking about how expensive college is in just a little bit. And I know with my own kids, I wanted them out in 4 years or less, just because of how expensive it was. And I'm a big believer in birds of a feather flock together. And so if most kids can graduate within 4 years, I felt very comfortable that my children would. So what I look for in a 4-year graduation rate is at least 50% of students graduate within 4 years, which might sound very low to you, but in the United States, about 56% of freshmen graduate in 6 years. So if a school can do it in 4, if most students can do it in 4, I felt pretty good about that. Now, there are some colleges that will not have strong 4-year graduation rates, and it does not make them bad in any way. There's what's known as a co-op program. A number of colleges, universities require this. And what a co-op is, a student works typically for 2 semesters in their major, in their field. They're paid, and they're paid good money for this. You don't typically pay tuition at all during these periods, but you can't graduate in 4 years because of this requirement. I actually think it makes students stronger applicants after graduation because they've got real work experience. Typically, they're probably going to be hired by the companies they did their co-ops for. Some schools that do require this: Purdue, Oregon State, Rochester Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, University of Cincinnati, Northeastern are just some of the ones. So again, never be afraid to ask admissions questions. If you see a lower 4-year graduation rate, say, can you explain why? I think that's a good question to ask. And sometimes it can be, it's an overcrowded state school and students can't get the classes that they need to graduate to get out in 4 years. It can be very hard. And so maybe it doesn't mean it's going to take 6 years, but it might take 4 years and 2 quarters. So again, knowledge is important. The retention rate is the percentage of freshmen who come back for their sophomore year. Again, my rule of thumb is 80, although quite frankly, if a school had an 80% retention rate, I'd probably tell a student, no, I would run away. I like to see closer to 90 and stuff, but and most schools are, most what I call good schools are, but pay attention to that. Do they have the specific programs that a student's looking for? Again, you don't necessarily have to know what you want to major in, and most college freshmen change their mind anyways, but if you think you might want to be a nurse, make sure there's a nursing program. If you think you want to study business, make sure there's a business school. It's not the end of the world to transfer, but it's disruptive. And so, again, I would look for what you're looking for. Does the cost work within your family budget? And we're going to spend time talking about cost in just a minute. And does the culture of the school fit you? Colleges have personalities. They have vibes, which is why it's so important to visit colleges in person, because there is, I don't care what it says on paper, it doesn't reflect. Both of my children they went to different undergraduate programs, but they both ended up at colleges that at the beginning of their college process, they said, hey, I'm not going there. And it wasn't because their dad and I said, yes, you will. But we did make them visit, and they're like, wow, this is so different than what I imagined. And they both ended up going to schools that they said they would never go to, and did very well and are very successful and happy. So that culture is important, and everybody's different. We all respond differently. So this little chart here, again, I don't want people to get hung up on acceptance rate. So what this is showing, and it's just a sampling, I'm showing the 4-year graduation rate here, and then I'm showing the acceptance rate. So you can see NYU, New York University, has a 76% graduation rate. Great. So anything over 50, 21% of students are admitted. Then we have Santa Clara University, which is a great university, very strong in computer science and business and all that. 87% graduation rate. but a 50% acceptance rate. Okay, that's cool. University of Michigan, again, great schools, 80% graduation rate. It's got a 26% acceptance rate and accepts 45% of this because it's a public university, so it accepts 45%. Then we got Stanford with a 73% graduation rate and only a 5%. So you can see that the acceptance rate does not reflect the graduation rate. You've got Gonzaga with a 75% acceptance rate or graduation rate and a 72% acceptance rate. And it's a great school, great engineering, great computer science, great merit aid. It's a great school. So anyways, just know, don't get hung up on acceptance rate. Again, I don't have a problem with students applying to some highly selective, but balance out your list, because if you only apply to the highly selectives, you may, and I hear these stories, people reach out to me every year, my child applied to however many schools and got into none. And that is so sad, such a sad story. So again, when I'm classifying colleges based on admissibility, I have matches, which means, wow, you're very likely to be admitted. And 80% of colleges in the US accept at least half the students who apply. So students should have a lot of match schools. A match school is not a safety school. It just means that they're likely to be admitted. There's maybes and reaches. So this is University of Washington. So this is a student with a 3.8 cumulative GPA. And they've taken a number of rigor classes. Remember, that can be the advanced placement or IB or honors or whatever. So UW does, I said earlier, I showed a 53% acceptance rate. It actually accepts in-state students at a slightly higher rate. It's closer to 60%. But I would tell this student that it's a maybe, and you might go, what? It's just because UW is, they're very unpredictable in their admissions, and we just went through the admissions process, and many of you might have heard stories of 4.0 students who were not admitted and all this stuff, and I certainly experienced that too. But so I tell most students who are strong, I just say make UW a maybe. And then if they were trying to apply to computer science, I always tell those students it's a reach, and it's just because of how selective computer science is at UW. When you're finalizing a college list, here's just some of my thoughts. There's no magic number. I'm always asked, well, how many colleges? I think it's ridiculous how many schools students sometimes apply. Not all. Some students apply to 3. And again, that can be great. Some apply to 6, some apply to 10. I would say on average, the majority of students, it's probably like 8 to 12 is the normal. But some students apply to 30. Personally, I think that's crazy, but don't be afraid. So let's say you're interested in business, you're interested in computer science, you're interested in chemistry, reach out to the departments at the universities. Don't be afraid to reach out to them. You know, psychology is offered everywhere. Economics is offered in most places. Doesn't mean they teach it the same. So don't be afraid to reach out and talk and get your questions, find out what do students do after they graduate, where are the internships, how hard is it to get an internship, where are students getting hired by, and things like that. Read the FIS guide, which I mentioned earlier. Look at the data. Talk to students, man. It's not hard to find students. If you tour, you can talk to them. Look at their different clubs that interest you. Maybe find them on social media and reach out and go, hey, I'm a high school student. I'm wondering if you can tell me something about your campus. How affordable is it for your family budget? Do they have the programs offered? And what is the culture of the campus? Does it fit you? Does it fit your personality? Not your parents' personality, but you, the student. Because keep in mind that there's no perfect school. And again, I create these college lists and I color code them. And, you know, and it's based on GPA, test scores, if that's a thing, and then the college's acceptance rate. Keeping in mind, if it's an out-of-state public, you do have to factor in what percentage of out-of-state students that they do. Some kids end up with more of a pyramid, some have more of a balanced rectangle, some have a hexagon, some, like I was talking to a student today and I said, I think pretty much because it had to do with her geographic area, but I said, I'm pretty comfortable that pretty much every school on your list, you're going to be admitted to. And that doesn't make it bad. There's nothing wrong with that. What you don't want to have is this, where it's mostly reach schools, and you have like one school that you're like, yeah, I'm likely to get in, and then they go, but I don't want to go there. It's like, well, don't have it on your list then. If you know in your heart of hearts that you wouldn't go to a school, don't apply. It takes time, effort, and money to do that. So another piece of the puzzle in trying to figure out the fit of a college is the cost, the affordability. And college is, in the US, is so expensive. I'm just getting done paying, we've made our last college payment. Our son's in graduate school. And again, every family handles it differently. Okay, so there's just because one family decides to do it one way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. It's a personal choice as to how families handle the cost of college. But sometimes I think families think, oh, my child's super bright, they're going to get a full ride scholarship. And so 0.1% of students in the US receive a full ride. A full ride means tuition and room and board. 1.5% of students receive a full tuition scholarship. 7% of high school athletes play a varsity sport in college. 2% will play NCAA Division I, and 2% will receive athletic scholarships. So those big full rides, or being recruited by, to play a sport, you might be being recruited, but a lot of the schools don't have any athletic scholarships that they pay out. So unfortunately, the US system was designed where parents are expected to pay for college. Now, this does not mean, students who are listening, that you can say, hey, this lady on this webinar said that you have to pay for my college. That's not what I'm saying. In other countries, like if you happen to be a Canadian citizen, Canadian government subsidizes the cost of college, and it makes it much more reasonable than US colleges for their citizens. The US does not do that. And so parents have to think about their willingness to pay, not just their ability to pay, because again, a lot of the families here might have, well-paying jobs in technology and all that, but that doesn't mean, that you want to pay that kind of money out for college. And cost is a very important part of the fit. And I'm kind of surprised at how often parents don't talk about this with their children. It should be a normal part of the conversation. I've had parents say to their child, well, what do you think the budget should be? And I'm like, oh my gosh, teenagers do not understand money. And that is not anything I would ever put in the hands of a teenager. There's something, it's more than just tuition. There's room and board. There's what's called a net price calculator on every college website. There's two different types of aid that can be given out. There's need-based aid, and just put my hand up here. I say this every single time. I am not a financial planning college counselor. If you need referrals for them, I'm happy to do it. They're not going to be free, but it is not me. I understand the basics, but I'm not a college financial planning college counselor. And so there's need-based aid, and then there's merit aid. And merit aid, I mentioned it earlier, is a wonderful thing for a lot of the students in our area because it's based on the merit of the student. But I do believe it's really important as parents to have an honest conversation about budget, to set expectations. The last thing I want to see is a family or a student taking on a huge burden of student loans that, there's websites with people telling their stories of how they wish they had done things differently and how it cripples them for the rest of their lives because of all this debt, because college is super expensive. And I have to be updating this one pretty soon too, but this is the annual cost of college. So, there's UW, it's about $28,000 a year. They said Western, Eastern, Central, Evergreen, they're cheaper. You can see it's 22,000. Gonzaga's on there, 63,000. As I said, strong students can expect to get $25,000, $30,000 a year from Gonzaga. So it makes it a little bit more reasonable, more in line with the in-state. The UCs, 62,000, no scholarship money whatsoever. That's what you're going to pay. We're going to talk about WUI schools in just a minute. Colorado State is a WUI, so I showed this at the WUI price. So it's a big reduction in tuition. So it's 35,000. Stanford, 76,000. I think it's going up. I just heard they're raising their rates. It's probably closer to 85,000 next year. And then we have a school like Lake Washington Tech or Bellevue College, and you can see $6,000. And that's why a lot of students, they start, especially if they don't know what they're doing, or, cost, they're trying not to take on so much debt, doing the first 2 years at a community college or technical college, or that's why students might do Running Start to get 2 years of college paid for. I'm always asked, how to make it cheaper. Well, there are things that it might be different than what you think about, but there are tools. So, and also in Washington State, there's something called a guaranteed admission program. This is for it's guaranteed admission for high school students who are graduating with a 3.0 cumulative GPA or higher. And it's guaranteed at Washington State, Western, Central, Eastern, and Evergreen State College. So know that those are guaranteed if you have a 3.0. I mentioned WUI. WUI stands for the Western Undergraduate Exchange. There's 14 states. Washington is one of them that participates. And I mentioned earlier that out-of-state non-resident tuition is typically 3 times in-state tuition. For WUI schools, it's 1.5 times. So it's a huge cost savings. I showed it for Colorado State. Unfortunately, it's not all of the public universities in the 14 states. It's a select list. Colorado State's one of them. Oregon State, Montana State, University of Idaho, Boise State. The only UC that's on there is UC Merced. But anyways, there's a number of schools. If you just type in the word WUE, W-U-E, it'll bring up a website and it'll show you all the different schools. Again, depending on the school, they can have certain, Montana State's another one, they have certain GPA requirements, or sometimes there's limitations to the majors and stuff like that. But it's a great way for students who want to go out of state and save a lot of money. University of Hawaii is a WUE school. Then there's what's called FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's an online form. I always encourage families just to fill it out, even if you go, I don't think I'll get any scholarship, or I won't qualify for anything. Well, there's things, if sometimes families want their students to be able to take out federal student loans to start getting a credit history, or work studies available, you have to fill out the FAFSA. Our family always filled it out every year. Typically, in the past, it's always come out October 1st. In senior year, the students would fill it out. They're doing what's called the FAFSA Simplification Act, which means it's not going to be very, the government's messing things up, but it's not coming out till December 1st. Let's see, there's a lot of resources available. It's a free form. There's lots of videos, and it's not hard to fill out. But a lot of college money, including sometimes Merit Aid, will require it, not always. The story I always tell about this is when our daughter, my oldest, was applying to college. This is back before I was a college counselor. And she knew what school she really wanted to go to. And I asked admissions, do we need to complete the FAFSA for Merit Aid? And they said, no. So we did not fill out the FAFSA. And she got her Merit Aid. And she went there. And then the tuition bills come out in the summer before the next semester starts, and our tuition bill came in and it did not have the Merit Aid on it. And I thought my husband was going to have a heart attack because it was substantial. And so I called and said, what happened to where's the Merit Aid? And they said, oh, he didn't fill out the FAFSA. So that's why we've just always made a point of filling out the FAFSA. And then also she did work study on campus and needed that. So anyways, just know that every college's website is required to have what's called a net price calculator. It's almost always on the financial aid page of a school's website. And again, I wouldn't bet my life and my budget and everything on it, but it's a simple form, and you can fill it out and get a sense by entering in some information about yourself as to seeing how much aid, Merit Aid, need-based aid, you might, and what the cost of college would be for attending there. So I always encourage families to do that. You might have heard the term expected family contribution. again, with this FAFSA simplification, they're changing it. It's going to be called the Student Aid Index, and it's starting, if you're class of 24, they're changing the terminology and stuff. But again, play around. Don't be afraid to talk to financial aid offices. Don't be afraid to talk to admissions to get a sense of, well, here's the stats on my student. Would they be offered anything or not? Because there are different types of money. So I love the ones that aren't paid back. You got grants, scholarships, merit scholarships, work study. What does have to be paid back are loans, and loans come in all different shapes and sizes. And, some of them start accumulating interest the day that they're taken out. Others, they wait until the student graduates. And sometimes parents can take out loans. Some are for the students. And it's, it just, you saw the numbers. College is very, very expensive. And as I said, I like merit scholarships, especially I like to see students rewarded for their hard work. And what a merit scholarship is, it's a tuition discount to attract a student to attend a college. That's what a merit scholarship is. It's typically based on grades. In the past, it used to include test scores. I don't see it as much anymore for test scores. I'm not saying students who submit test scores might not get more, but again, that's a question to ask a college. But you don't apply for merit aid. It is after a student applies and they receive their decision. It's a lot of times the merit amount is given with the admission. Sometimes it comes a couple of weeks later, but it's like, oh, congratulations, Mary Pat, you have been admitted, and we would like to give you $25,000 for each of the next 4 years, or 10,000 or 5, again, whatever it is. You don't repay them though. That's the gorgeous thing. And you do want to make sure that they're for 4 years of college. They typically are, but you always want to make sure. So how do you find out if a college actually offers merit aid? So the websites are great. If I was on a college's website, I would type in the words merit scholarship and see what comes up. Now, if I'm applying to an out-of-state public school, so if I'm applying to UT Austin or Georgia Tech or Oregon State or Montana State, make sure you type in the words non-resident merit aid and see what comes up. I have found in my years of doing this, public universities, public colleges tend to be very straightforward and black and white. And they'll say, oh, if you have this GPA or a test score, a combination, this is how much you will get. And it's very specific. The private schools will be like, we have scholarships and they range. So just know, but again, don't be afraid to reach out to admissions and say, hey, I've got this fabulous kid, or fabulous kid you can reach out to. It doesn't have to be your parents, but just say, these are my grades. I got lots of rigor or few rigor. I got this GPA, I do this. How much can I expect? And again, not all schools give merit aid. There are certainly the highly selective schools. I already said that earlier. They don't have to, because merit aid is a tuition discount to attract students to attend. They don't need to do anything. They say, you don't want your spot? There's people behind you who'll gladly take it. So, but I love to see merit aid. And in my opinion, the most important college on a student's list is the one that they will be admitted to, that they'll thrive in, and that they can afford. That affordability is so important. So let's talk a little bit about college majors, and I'll be opening it up to questions pretty soon. So again, colleges do it all different about majors. Some admit to majors, some say you just start off and then you pick your major later, but these are just some questions to ask, and these are good questions to ask. And so first of all, ask a college, do you admit into the major or into the college or school? And what that means is, there are some schools that if you say, I want to be a nurse, then you're applying directly into the nursing program. Sometimes students say, oh, I'm interested in biology, and they're like, okay, we're going to admit you to the College of Life and Sciences or Arts and Sciences, whatever, but you're not necessarily into biology. But again, just ask them, how do they do it? You might be able to find it out on the website, but you can also just ask them, can you change your major once you're admitted? Like if you say, oh yeah, I applied to be a biomedical engineer, but now I want to be a biology student. Do they allow that? Can you list an alternate major? For example, University of Washington asks for an alternate major. They don't actually consider it, but students should put down a second major, because if a student put down, like, let's say computer science and no alternate, and UW doesn't accept a student to computer science because it's so selective, and there's not a second major listed, then they just won't admit the student. But if there's a second major, they may, it's likely, possibly, whatever, that they would admit them to the University of Washington, but into a not a specific major, because they don't do that. Is there a second step in the admission for my major? And again, for most majors, there's not. But for some, if you want to apply to an architecture program, a dance program, are there supplements? Is there an music? Is there an audition? Is there anything that I have to do? Ask those questions. There's nothing wrong at most colleges about being undeclared or undecided. Again, you guys, you're teenagers, your brain's not formed, you don't have everything all figured out. As I said, more than 50% of college freshmen change their major anyways. But if you go in undecided, I would ask the question, how will you support me to figure it out so that I graduate within 4 years? And again, colleges should have very specific answers. And if they don't, I would be cautious about that. Again, changing your majors, can you design your own major? And again, do your research. Again, I would wait till you had your list that you're working on, but these are good questions to ask about majors, because they all handle it different. I don't know how many of you are interested in computer science. Computer science has become so selective, because many of the top computer science programs, they do admit directly as freshmen. And the last couple of years, I have seen this where, strong students are just not being admitted. So you can see, like Carnegie Mellon, it's already a super difficult, highly selective school, but their computer science acceptance rate, 5%. Berkeley, 8.5%, Urbana, 7%, UT Austin, 15, 13, yeah, there we go. UW actually looks pretty good at 27%, but it's still super, super hard to get into. And then these are just some examples. There's tons of them, Colorado State, Oregon State, Seattle U, University of Arizona, Washington State. They've got great computer science programs. They're not teaching it most likely any different than some of the other ones are. So again, doesn't mean you won't get into the more selective, but if computer science is your dream, make sure you've got a balanced list and some good choices. And there's also, computer science is very broad. These are some other majors that you might want to consider besides straight up computer science. Computer engineering, electrical engineering, data science, robotics, GIS, human-centered design. You guys can read, but there's lots of different options, because let's face it, technology is part of pretty much most careers nowadays. And the engineering isn't quite as low, but it's still not necessarily easy to get into some engineering programs. You can see Georgia Tech, which again is a super hard school to get into. Engineering's 18%, Urbana 33%, Michigan 20%, Purdue 37%, UT Austin 19%. So, and then some other great strong engineering programs: Arizona State, Gonzaga, Oregon, Seattle U, Washington State. And then there's pre-professional majors, and these are things like, I'd like to become a doctor, I'd like to become a lawyer, I'd like to become a physical therapist, I'd like to become a dentist. Okay, so there's no pre-med is very popular. I get a lot of questions about that. So there's no major that's called pre-med. Students can pretty much major in anything that they want. Most students do choose a science path because in order to take the MCAT to get into medical school, there are certain science classes that have to be taken, and it's just kind of easier that way. But so again, schools handle things differently. One of the things that I would check out is the advising program that they have for the various pre-professional program. You could be if you want to go to pharmacy school. How do they support students? Find out, like if you're interested in medical school, how many freshmen who start at a university and say, I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to become a doctor, how many of them actually take the MCAT? And then from those who take the MCAT, how many of them actually get into medical school? Because the national average is 47% of college freshmen who say they're going to go to medical school, 47% actually take the MCAT. So that's a pretty huge drop off. And then 40% of those who take the MCAT actually end up getting into medical school. So find out how will you be supported, what medical schools are students getting into, what law schools, what physical therapy schools, what dental schools, how do they handle letters of recommendation, all, how easy is it to do research or shadowing or, volunteering, whatever it is that you need, but ask those questions. Is there a pre-med club, a physical therapy club? Talk to those members, see what you find out. Again, there's no harm in asking questions. And then how do you explore careers? So again, some simple questions. What careers interest you? What are you curious about? What do you love? I always tell students, high school students, to talk to people whose careers interest them, because how is a student supposed to know what an engineer does or a nurse does or a teacher does or a finance major or whatever it is? And this is where parents can really help students and be of support. If your student's interested in a specific career, reach out, either people or reach out through your own network and say, hey, my kid's really interested in this. Does anybody know anybody? And if you're a parent and you happen to do the career that your child's interested in, please don't be offended by this comment, but you're probably the last person your teen should talk to. You're just too close, okay? And teens, by their very nature, have to separate from mom and dad. So, find them somebody else to talk to. Your teen will listen differently than they will to the same information from you. And teens can ask, questions, and most adults are thrilled if anybody shows an interest in what they do, especially if a high school student is polite and, professional and personable with them. But asking simple questions like, hi, can you tell me, how did you know you wanted to do this? How did you get from my age to where you are now? Where did you go to school for undergrad? What was your major in? Did you go to graduate school? Knowing everything that you know now, would you do it the same way, or would you do a different path? What do you love about what you do? What's your least favorite thing about what you have to do? What advice do you have for somebody my age? And again, you don't have to take it, but you can listen to it. And if you really like what you hear and you connect with the person, don't be afraid to say, hey, is it possible that I could possibly job shadow with you sometime? And all job shadowing means is that you sit quietly for an hour or two and you just observe, take notes, maybe ask them questions afterwards. And if you love that and you're like, oh my God, this is so great, that's maybe when you go, hey, over the summer, could I possibly give you 4 or 5 hours one day a week, and I'll do little projects for you or file, and whatever it is that you need, so that you can get a sense of what is that like. And all this type of stuff can go onto your high school activity list, and it gives you some of that real world experience. Again, the job shadowing WANET classes, oh my God, the WANET classes are great. I think the sign up stopped today, actually, but we have full year WANET classes, summer WANET classes. WANET stands for the Washington Network of Innovative Careers. They're great hands-on learning for kids. Summer internships, but all the stuff, it just, again, sometimes students do these things and go, you know what I found out? This is not the field for me. Hallelujah. And other times they go, oh my gosh, and it can get them all excited and all that. I'm a big fan of visiting colleges. I have to say I get irritated by the number of families who go, oh no, that's not important. We're going to wait till we get all our acceptances in senior year and we're going to go then. Personally, I think it's a very bad idea. One, you're going to run out of time. Two, visiting colleges makes such a difference. I mean, do you have to visit them all? No, but you prioritize, or if you're going to go on a family vacation and there happens to be a couple schools that you can go to, please do it. And I don't mean walking through the campus. I mean going on an official tour, listening to the information, registering, being in there, letting the college know that you were there. It makes such a huge difference. I'm always amazed when I had a parent student tell me that their mom's like, oh, they don't, it's a waste of money. And I'm like, you're going to spend $75,000 a year for 4 years, but you won't spend some money to go tour some colleges. I don't understand it. But here's some reasons why to tour colleges. One, it demystifies for students what it means to go to college. A lot of times it's this thing and they don't understand what it means. And then kids can be like, oh my gosh, I can do this. It can motivate a student who maybe isn't very enthusiastic about high school, but then they go someplace and they go, oh, I need these kind of grades. I need to take these kind of classes, or, it motivates them because they're like, this is where I want to be. Some colleges care about demonstrated interests, which I'll go into greater detail in just a minute. And it can be a great way to demonstrate interest. It can help a student figure out what is the right fit. Again, on paper, it can all seem the same. How do you pick? But when they start going and visiting, I remember when our daughter, and we visited a whole bunch of schools, and it was time for her to make a decision, and she was going between two. And I said to her, well, you know what this tells you is that a liberal arts college in California is the right fit. So you can't make a bad fit or a bad choice. They're both good, but at least you figured that part out. And it also creates discussion points between parents and students. I always tell parents, and it's hard to kind of try to keep your mouth closed during college tours, because the student's going to be the one who's attending, not you. And as parents, we see things differently. But, it'll allow you to have conversations. Oh, like, how did you feel? And then you can bring up things if things bothered you. But again, how did they feel? Because it is their choice. So I mentioned demonstrated interest. It's just the interest that somebody demonstrates in a college. And remember, I talked about yield management. Demonstrated interest is certainly something that colleges might pay attention to. And if they pay attention to it, it's on that selection chart that I showed you from college data. It says level of applicants' interest. If it's not considered, okay, it's not considered. But in some cases, it's going to be considered or important or very important. But demonstrated interest can be done by touring schools. Again, not just walking on campus. They don't know that you've been there. You have to register and go through an official tour. Attending the college sessions at the high schools. A lot of our high schools, colleges come in the fall. Students make a point of going to those, talking to the admissions people, getting their card, maybe sending them an email afterwards going, wow, it was great to meet you. I'm so excited. I can't wait to apply. College fairs, emailing admissions with questions. I don't know why so many people are afraid, like you can't ask questions. They love to hear, especially from students, opening emails. They track all that. Follow them on social media. Again, they track all of that kind of stuff. There's lots of ways to demonstrate interest. So most college applications are due in November of senior year. There are different college deadlines. The first one is called early decision. And so with the college deadlines, it depends on the college as to what deadline. Some offer multiple, some only offer one. And, again, it's going to depend. But early decision is not offered by all schools. It is a binding decision. So if a student applies early decision to a college, and a student is only allowed to apply to one college early decision, if they get admitted, they have to go. It's basically a contract that a family is signing, and the parents have to sign off on it. The school counselor has to sign off on it. Many schools have higher acceptance rates for early decision than they do for regular decision. Again, not all, most of my students don't apply early decision. It's a huge decision. And again, applying early decision doesn't guarantee anything for you. Early action is different. It's a non-binding deadline. I encourage students, especially if they're strong students, to apply early action if it's available, because the pool of applicants is going to be smaller, so the student has a greater chance of being admitted. Students still have until May 1st to make their decision. They can still apply to other schools. Whereas like with early decision, if a student is admitted to a college and they've applied elsewhere, they have to rescind all their college applications because they have made that commitment. So anyway, so there's early action. You typically will hear back both with early decision and early action late December, early January, typically. Again, it depends on the school. Regular decision is Just again, some schools have early decision, early action, regular decision. The University of Washington has one application. It's regular decision. It's November 15th. University of California schools, one application deadline, regular decision, November 30th. So again, I know this is confusing. And then some colleges have what's called rolling admissions. And what that means is they just keep accepting students on a rolling basis. With all these other deadlines, there's a deadline and the student may not hear for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Again, it depends on the college till how long before they notify students. With rolling admissions, it's typically within a month. Students will typically hear back from a college and they just keep accepting students until they're full. Some schools that do rolling admissions, and I think rolling admissions are great. I always tell kids, why don't you do 1 or 2 rolling so you'll hear, you're going to college, and then it takes some of the pressure off of you while you wait for the other ones. But Oregon State, Arizona State, University of Arizona, Washington State, they all do. Montana State, they do rolling admissions. There's different application platforms for colleges. The Common App is the most widely used. UW uses it and stuff. There's a great resource for completing the Common App. It's called Access Companion. And what it is, it's something like 50 or 60 short little videos that teach students how to complete it. And I heard that they're coming out with a Spanish version of it this year, which will be phenomenal. There's what's called the Coalition application, Universal application. I have to say, those are not used as often. Common App is the big one. The University of California has its own application. The California state schools have their own application. Many universities do have their own application. So again, depending where a student is applying, even if a school, let's say, is on the Common App, but let's say, I don't know, let's say you're applying to the California state schools and then you want to apply to UW Bothell. Even though UW Bothell uses the Common App, you could just use their own application. So you don't have to, but just know there's lots of different platforms out there. So how do you choose? It's hard, but you got to weigh everything. It's not just acceptance rate. It's the cost. It's, what feels like the right fit. Do they have the programs that you want? Are they your people? Is it the right academic environment for you? What kind of opportunities will you get out in 4 years? Most likely. There's lots of different things, but May 1st is the college decision day. So I'm going to open it up to questions if you have any. Just so you know, as I said, I am a resource in the community. There will be, I'm going to send out handouts, all the resources. I do not share my slides, but if there's a specific slide you want, let me know. I'll gladly send it to you. You can reach me at findyourfit@lwsf.org. And there will be a class of 24 3-part college boot camp this summer. The first one will be an hour-long session on how to create a balanced college list. The second one is on how to complete your college applications, again, another hour long. And then the final one is the 2-hour how to write a college essay. I don't have the dates yet, but follow Find Your Fit or the foundation on social media and you will be notified. So, all right, so if there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them. Does Running Start GPA count toward high school cumulative GPA for the college application? Absolutely, it does. It is part of your high school GPA. And then when a student, so what happens, you apply as a high, as I said, as a college freshman, even though you've got college credits. And then after you've accepted an offer of admission, your transcript is sent, and then your Running Start transcript is also sent, and then they'll say, oh, in most cases, they're going to take all the classes, and they'll say, oh, okay, you're starting as a junior, or you're starting as a sophomore, second quarter, whatever it is. But then those college classes that you took in Running Start become part of your college transcript. So like if you were applying to medical school or something like that, or law school, that's all going to be part of that. Or if you're applying to a specific major and maybe it's selective and a GPA is required. So always do well in those classes. Let's see. For the 3.0 GPA guarantee admissions, do students need to apply Well, you always, okay, so the question is, you know, do you apply to your dream school first? And then I guess if you don't get in, do you go to the guaranteed admission? All colleges have deadlines. And so you have to, you do have to apply by the deadline. However, there's often, but there's no guarantee for this part. So let's say, I can't remember, let's say for Western University, I think their deadline is February 1st. I can't remember off the top of my head. I've got lots of deadlines that go through my head, but let's say it's February 1st. You have to apply by February 1st. And, and again, there's nothing wrong. It's not a hard application. Once you find out, and then you got in case you don't get into your dream school. But there are colleges, as I said, May 1st is the college. You have to let colleges know. There are a number of colleges. You can always find these online. Some of the college associations listed out. I've already seen it printed a couple times. These are schools that are still accepting college or high school students for fall of 23, even though the deadlines have passed. So there's always colleges that will accept students later, but I can't guarantee that it would be any of those the Washington State guaranteed ones. I would just apply, get it in. Is Running Start accepted by all colleges? No, not necessarily. That's part of the research that a student needs to do. Again, in our area, yes. In the West, yes. Is it possible that a student applies to some private school in, I don't know, South Carolina, and they go, we don't recognize this? That's possible. Again, do your research. I always tell students that should be a question. How do you handle dual enrollment? Most places it's fine. They understand it. It's not an issue at all, but I don't want to say it's 100% guaranteed accepted by everybody. Which is better to take, Running Start or AP? It depends on the student. AP is considered more rigorous than Running Start. But for some students, Running Start is the better fit for them. Some students cannot stand the high school environment. Some students would do better taking 3 classes a quarter, having flexibility with their schedule, being able to take, different classes. I've had students do Running Start who get accepted into, Boston University, like great schools. I just say, do what's right. The student should do what's right for the student. UW did say, this was at that panel last week, and I was kind of surprised. It's not that they don't like Running Start, but if a student is taking super easy classes through Running Start, I don't know, let's say PE or, just classes that are super easy, that when they could be taking harder classes at high school, UW might take that into consideration. So students should be pushing themselves through Running Start and taking more difficult classes that fit their interests, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Again, and the reason why AP is considered more rigorous is AP advanced placement classes are regulated through college boards. So when a college sees that a student has taken AP Calculus AB, they know exactly what the curriculum is. They know exactly what the test is. They know what a 3 means, a 4 means, a 5 means for scoring, versus if they see Math 202 from Bellevue College, they may not be as familiar with that. And again, it doesn't mean it's not rigorous, but I think colleges consider AP and IB more rigorous than Running Start. That being said, I've had plenty of kids get into UW and other colleges who did Running Start. So again, it depends on the student, but you want to do well, that's for sure. So applications, again, it depends on the school. Sometimes students can get fee waivers, but they typically cost about $75 per application. So, when I see these kids applying to 30 different schools, it's like, geez Louise, that's a lot. Would it make sense to apply to multiple? I don't know what that questions mean. Our AP, yeah, AP AP classes are, if you mean the credits, again, it depends on the college as to what AP scores they accept for credit, because that's the point of the AP classes, besides showing colleges that students can take a faster paced, harder class, because they're harder, they're faster, they're harder. You can go on to the College Board website, and there's a list, and it shows by college what AP tests that they will accept and what the score minimum, because there's some colleges that will accept 3s, there's some that only accept 5s. It depends on the school. At Eastlake, if my student takes UW, do you think I don't, UW doesn't give preferential treatment to students who take UW in the classroom. What the UW in the classroom just shows that a student is taking more rigorous classes. Is that important to UW? Yeah, it is. I can't say that just taking that one class will get them in. UW is very UW is hard to predict with admissions, unfortunately. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, somebody asked about ranking students. So and they asked if it's a problem. In our district, none of the high schools rank. They just don't rank. It's just what we do. So on the college application, there is a ranking question, and then one of the boxes is not available, and that's what you list, because it's not available. So that, again, it's out of the student's control. There's nothing that they can do about it. So it doesn't hurt the student at all because they don't offer it. How do students report their running start classes senior year? Okay, good question. So it's tough, all right? So students have to make their best guess. And I tell my students, and this counts for running start students, and it also counts for students who are in their regular high schools. So let's say, a student fills out their college application, and the question is, what classes are you taking senior year? And so a student lists them down. For running start, they don't know because they haven't registered for the classes, but they should have a plan. They should be, okay, this is what I'm going to take. And let's say one of them is an English class the student's going to take, and it's going to be English 202, whatever it is. And when it comes time to take it, 202 is no longer available, so they have to take English 205. That's not a big deal. Okay, you don't need to do anything crazy. But let's say the student decides instead to take, I don't know, Art 101 or PE or something like that. Students need to notify colleges if they change their schedule. And the same is true for high school students who are in the regular high school. There's a lot of students who, once they get their, not a lot, I don't know how many do this, but it happens. Students who sign up for classes, finish their first semester, have completed their college applications, senioritis kicks in big time, and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to take those AP classes anymore, and they switch out. Boy, oh boy, I tell kids, you better notify the college and let them know, because if they get if let's say it's UW and you've accepted their offer of admission and they get your final transcript and it's different from what they told you, from what you told them at the time of your application, that gives them grounds to say, sorry, we changed our mind. Same thing is true, as I said, if student has been a good student, they're admitted to a school, UC, UW, whatever, and they've always gotten good grades, and all of a sudden they start getting C's and D's because they don't care anymore, college can rescind their offer of admission. So, or if a student got suspended or things like that, they can rescind their offer of admission. So pay attention. So with running start, they just have to make their best guess, and they should have a plan. They should be working with somebody to figure out what they are. How useful is it to do a STEM camp in the summer? I think summer activities can be very useful. They can teach kids things. you know, I don't know what STEM camp you're talking about, but let's say it's one that's affiliated with a college. And I often get asked, and they can cost a lot of money. There's some camps that can cost $5,000, $10,000. And I get asked the question, is it, you know, will it help me get into a college? Again, at a highly selective school, it's probably not going to make any, it's not going to make any difference. Like, it's not going to get you like an extra point. It could, if you look at that college data site, and if you see demonstrated interest, is something that they consider. And I would certainly encourage a student, if I was working with them, to talk about the experience of that camp at that specific school, for that specific college, you know, talk about how much it changed them. But the biggest impact, in my opinion, of any type of these, they're called in the industry pay to play, because you pay money to be able to participate in these. It's not so much that you did them, it's what did you learn in them, and how did that change you moving forward? You know, because of whatever you did, like, oh my gosh, I learned about this, and then I started doing, you know, I created an app, or I started doing my own research on something because of what I learned at that camp. That to me is the value. Just doing a camp to do a camp, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily going to sway them into anything. So, okay, well, I think that's all the questions. I appreciate everybody's participation, especially on such a lovely day, and I hope you benefited from it. And as I said, there will be the recording will be sent out along with the resources. And anytime, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to findyourfit@lwsf.org. I'm always happy to get questions. I answer them as quickly as I can. And I'm just a resource in the community, and share that information with others in case people have questions on colleges. So I hope everybody has a great night. Enjoy the nice weather tomorrow. And thanks for showing up tonight.